Welcome to Worthwhile Watches. I'm Rob. Today we're going to be looking at a new Traveler GMT from Islander, the Port Jefferson GMT. This watch has a whole lot to offer at a very reasonable price. But is it a worthwhile watch to add to your collection? Let's find out. If you're not familiar with Islander watches, it's a brand owned by Mark Frankel.
Hi, this is Mark from LongIslandWatch.com.
Mark launched the Islander brand in 2019, and since then he's really grown the brand, and lately he's been introducing a lot of unique and original designs, including this Port Jefferson. There is a link in the description if you'd like to check out Long Island Watch, but I have no affiliation with Long Island Watch, and this is my personal watch from my collection. Now for a very brief history of Port Jefferson, New York, featuring the help of AI Photobot 3000. Port Jefferson, New York gets its name, of course, from Thomas Jefferson. No, that's George Jefferson. Yep, that's Thomas Jefferson. In the 1600s, it's even claimed that the pirate Captain Kidd docked in the harbor. No, that's Billy the Kid. I said Captain Kidd. No, that's Captain Kirk. Okay, you know what? Let's just move on to specs. The Port Jefferson GMT has a very wearable case size of 40 millimeters. Lug to lug measures 47.8 millimeters, and I measure the thickness as 13.4 millimeters, including the domed sapphire crystal. Lug width is 20 millimeters, and the watch comes on a beads of rice style stainless steel bracelet with an Islander branded clasp and 4 micro adjust holes. Water resistance is rated to 150 meters, and the weight sized for me is 152 grams. The bezel features a bidirectional 24-hour scale for tracking a third time zone. The bezel insert is aluminum rather than ceramic, but that does give it a nice matte sheen and adds to the sort of vintage skin diver look. The dial of the Port Jefferson has a pleasing balance to it. The placement and proportions of the text work well, and the blue and orange elements complement each other nicely, in my opinion. The indices are clear and the hands are legible. The date window at 6 o'clock is cleanly framed and stands out without overpowering the other design elements on the dial. There is, however, one problem I have with this dial. The minute markers have too many divisions between them, making the individual minute markers almost impossible to distinguish. This makes setting the watch precisely very difficult unless you set it exactly on one of the 5 minute markers. It is a small complaint, but it's definitely something I noticed right away. As for the bezel, it's a 120 click bidirectional bezel rather than a 24 or 48 click bezel. It turns smoothly in either direction without being too stiff or loose, and mine is also perfectly aligned. There is a subtle difference in the shade of blue on the bezel insert to indicate day and night hours. Overall, I find this an extremely attractive dial to look at. The crystal is a single domed sapphire with AR coating on the underside. Viewing is very clear, and I've never had a problem reading the time in any lighting conditions. There is some distortion when viewing at an angle, which I always enjoy. You can see a blue tint from the AR coating, but because it matches the color scheme of this watch, I don't find it distracting at all. The case is well finished, with brushing on the top and sides, and polished chamfers along the edges of both the top and the bottom of the case. The screw-down case back features an embossed image of a lighthouse, and the crown is signed with the Islander logo. The crown is a good size, it's nice and grippy, and the operation is smooth. The bracelet of the Port Jefferson is a beads of rice style. It's brushed on the top and sides of each link, but the center section of each link is polished. Links and end links are solid, the bracelet is adjusted with screws, and the female end links help make this watch more wearable for small wrists. The clasp is a dual push-button type with Islander branding. There are 4 micro adjust holes, and the internals are milled. I have to say, if there was one change I'd make to this watch, it would be the bracelet. I'm not really a fan of polished center links. I like my watches mostly brushed, with a polished edge or chamfer here and there. so I would have preferred a fully brushed oyster-style bracelet on this watch. The other thing I really would have appreciated is an on-the-fly micro-adjust clasp. But these are by no means deal breakers, and I have been wearing the watch on this bracelet without much concern. But what about the movement inside this watch? As you can see, this particular movement is running quite nicely on the time grapher, but let's see what's actually powering this watch. The Miyota 9075 is a recently released true GMT automatic movement. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, or 8 ticks per second. It has a power reserve of 42 hours, hacking, hand winding, a date function, and a Traveler GMT function, which until recently typically has only been found on high-end, expensive watches like the Rolex GMT Master. Less expensive GMT movements have usually used the collar or office GMT type. In an office or collar GMT, the hour and minute hand are set to your local time zone, and the GMT hand can move independently in order to be set to a time zone in another part of the world. So, if you need to call a client in Australia, you can set your GMT hand to Sydney time and avoid calling your client outside of business hours when he might be right in the middle of his son's didgeridoo performance.
Ah, crikey, mate. Who's calling me? Don't they know what time it is?
As far as a Traveler GMT, imagine you're beginning a much-needed vacation. Your plane is touching down in an exotic land.
This is your captain speaking. Local time is 6:49 a.m.
You check your watch. The hour and minute hand are still set to your home time zone. Pulling the crown out one click allows the hour hand to move independently without disturbing the movement of any of the other hands. The sun is just rising over this foreign land. Adventure and excitement await you in the days to come. The orange glow of the rising sun calls your attention to the orange GMT hand, and you remember that back home it's only 1:49 a.m. Your friends and family are still slumbering in darkness, and that's when you realize, we forgot Kevin! So, what about late at night, when you're alone, inside a dark, foreboding mansion, in an attempt to win the inheritance of some previously unknown relative who owned this supposedly haunted manor? Will you be able to tell the time throughout your night of horrors? Or will your loom pathetically fade away after mere minutes? Well, I'm happy to report that the Port Jefferson won't let you down. This time-lapse footage will give you an idea of how the loom performs. After 20 minutes, all three hands are still clearly visible, and even the bezel numbers haven't faded completely. I can also report that at the end of this test, the watch was even more easily visible to the eye than the camera shows here, and it continued to be readable for hours. This is not a particularly lightweight or slim watch that just disappears on the wrist, but it's also not an especially chunky, heavy, or cumbersome watch to wear. It's a nice balance of presence without being overbearing at all. How a watch wears is a very subjective experience from person to person, but the dimensions and weight should allow it to fit a wide range of wrists quite comfortably. The bracelet is well proportioned and creates a nice balance on the wrist. At almost 13.5 millimeters, I wouldn't say it will disappear under a cuff, but in my opinion, the case shape and slightly downturned lugs help shrink the size visually, and the weight distribution makes this watch wear quite comfortably all day. So is this a worthwhile watch? Does it deserve a slot in your watch box? Let's see what makes this watch slot-worthy and not worthy. So what makes this watch slot-worthy? It has a Traveler or true GMT movement. It's one of the most affordable true GMT watches currently available. It's a good wearable size, It has very good overall specs, it has good lume, and it looks great. What might make this watch not worthy? The bezel insert is aluminum instead of ceramic. The beads of rice bracelet with polished center links might not be everyone's favorite choice. The minute markers are almost impossible to accurately distinguish. The 120-click bidirectional bezel rather than a 24 or 48-click bezel might be a bit strange to some. And it does not have an on-the-fly micro-adjust clasp. So there you go. I hope I've given you enough information to make an informed decision about this watch. In my opinion, it's definitely slot-worthy and will be staying in my collection for sure. But let me know in the comments what you think of this watch, and I'll see you next time. Until then, no matter what you have on your wrist, make your day worthwhile.